We might as well take the Constitution and rip it up, because that's what you're doing. You're creating a very dangerous precedent of attacking the speech and debate clause of the U.S. Constitution. We took an oath just a few weeks ago to vote against any legislation that is injurious to the people and erodes their rights and privileges. You are violating your oath to both the U.S. Constitution and the Tennessee Constitution, and it is shameful what is happening here today.
And then lastly, this would also prohibit completely sanctuary cities, and we've done that previously, but this would take it a little bit further. This would also create an e-felony for any local official or state official that tried to create a sanctuary city. We're not going to have that in this state. We're cooperating with federal officials and with state and federal law to deport anyone who is here illegally. So we're not going to have sanctuary cities in this state or any subdivision thereof that is a sanctuary city. So that has criminal penalties, and it has removal processes on that if any local official were to go down that road.
This is serious. We're going after elected officials based on how they vote. Imagine, we've already tried to expel them based on what they say. Now we're going after people for how they vote. This is wrong. It's a violation of everything we stand for. And so we just did the Pledge of Allegiance. That was just, we might as well just take that down now, because this is un-American. This is the root of it. You can say all the other stuff about this bill, but this bill, this provision in particular about charging people with a Class E felony based off of, it says here in the law, every elected official local government who votes in the affirmative shall be charged with a Class E felony. This is what the law says that you have drafted, which legal told you is incorrect, which is unconstitutional, which is going to be constitutionally suspect. And the thing is, it's not just in the U.S. Constitution. Our very own Tennessee Constitution has a very similar provision to this that protects legislators. It says individual legislators are immune from any kind of suit, including criminal prosecutions, for any act deemed as part of the legislative body's deliberative process. This is from the Tennessee State Constitution. Tennessee courts have repeatedly upheld this precedent. And so again, if you want to pass a lawsuit, that's on you. But I hope that we have record of everyone who votes against this, because we want you all to be the first brought before the courts to explain the constitutionality of this, because it is unconstitutional. We have told you this. You're going to vote however you want to vote, because this is not about immigration, because as the chairman said, we don't have any purview over immigration. This is about fear mongering. This is about giving red meat and acting like you're doing something when it's just about targeting both elected officials and individuals in our districts, because people are afraid that America is changing and becoming more diverse. Well, beloved, let us know that this diversifying of America is not a threat to any of us. It's something that makes this nation great. And if we want to vote on all these provisions, we might as well take down that lady in the harbor that says, "Give me your poor, your tired, your huddled masses." And would you please present to me your grandparents' immigration papers when they came? Because let's check the record of where they came from. Because unless your last name is Cherokee, Choctaw, Shawnee, or Yuchi, you are an immigrant from somewhere in Tennessee. And so again, this is unconstitutional. You've been warned. You're going to do this vote however you want to do it, but it's shameful. And the citizens of Tennessee deserve serious deliberation of people who take our constitutional oath seriously.
Members, this bill deals with the illegal immigration issue that we have now dealt with for several years in this country. For the last 4 years, we've had a virtually open and porous border, and we are suffering from that, unfortunately, as a state. Now with new leadership at the federal level, I hope over the next several years that will no longer be an issue, and we will get back to a legal immigration process that works well for everyone in our country, especially, and for folks throughout the world that yearn to come to the greatest nation on the planet. So with that, this bill would create the CIED division, the Centralized Immigration Enforcement Division. It's a couple of positions that will liaison with the federal government to ensure that the folks that are in this state that they are deporting that will leave our country because they were never legally here are illegal immigrants, not legal immigrants or U.S. citizens. We do not want those folks bothered in any way, but that only illegal immigrants will be deported. That coordination with the federal government, I think, is important, and these positions are there for that reason. The Immigration Enforcement Program, also known as the 287G program, we have some incentives in there currently in current law, but they're quite frankly not strong enough to allow for local law enforcement to be able to get state funds to cooperate in the 287G program. What I mean by that is when local law enforcement comes across someone who's an illegal immigrant and they arrest that individual, where they are holding that person on a local crime, a crime of the state of Tennessee. Well, there is also sometimes a federal hold through ICE that can occur. And so at the state of Tennessee, it's really, I think, beneficial for us to put some funds out there that would allow us to be able to bear some of that burden of holding that person until ICE lets the local law enforcement know whether or not they're going to be deporting that individual or not. Not every single person that local law enforcement would come in contact with that has immigration issues would be deported. In my time as an assistant district attorney many years ago, usually this process happened very quickly. Usually we would find out same day or next day if someone that was being in custody of the local jail, if ICE was going to deport them, or if they were like, nope, we're not going to come get that person, do whatever you wish. So we hope to get back to that protocol. Also, our state issued IDs on your driver's license. Your license looks exactly like any legal immigrant to this country's license. Now, the reason that's a problem is because when you sign up for a license, a lot of times they ask you if you want to register to vote. And so we know last year we had about 13,000 people who received letters from the Secretary of State because their immigration status was in question. Several hundred of those individuals then took themselves off the voting rolls. I would presume because after receiving that letter, they realized that it was illegal for them to vote. Only a U.S. citizen can vote in our elections, and only a U.S. citizen should be voting in our elections. I don't want somebody to get caught inadvertently up in a system where they've just gone and gotten a driver's license, which legal residents can do. Illegal immigrants cannot get a license in the state, thank goodness, but legal residents can. That license should look a little different than a U.S. citizen license. That's all this is. It'll be subtle differences, potentially different font, an X on it that's small, something like that. But it would look a little different than a U.S. citizen's license. And that license would be good to operate a motor vehicle in this state, but it would not be good to register to vote, or to obtain any service that only a U.S. citizen could obtain.
My name is Ashley Warbington, and I'm a native Nashvilleian married to a small business owner from Mexico, Alejandro. Together, we built a life in Tennessee, and we are raising our 8-year-old son, Marco. Alejandro is currently going through the legal immigration process to gain permanent residency, but even though he's doing everything right, he is still not insulated from the potential harm of this bill. Immigrants like Alejandro are vital to Tennessee's success. Alejandro built his business from the ground up, paying taxes, hiring employees, and contributing to the state's economy, just like any other Tennessean. In fact, foreign-born entrepreneurs like Alejandro represent 7.8% of Tennessee's business owners, even though they make up only 4.9% of the state's population. In 2018, immigrant-owned businesses generated $731.7 million in business income and provided jobs for tens of thousands of Tennesseans. This is the kind of economic growth we should be nurturing, not undermining with policies that threaten families like mine. But the impact of this bill isn't just economic, it's personal. Like many immigrant families in Tennessee, we live in what's called a mixed status household. In Tennessee, there are more than 70,000 families like mine, where a U.S. citizen is living with at least one undocumented family member. My son, Marco, is one of these children. He is just 8 years old, and he fears for his dad's safety as well as the safety of his friends and their families. No child should have to carry that kind of worry. The truth is, immigrants are not a threat to Tennessee's safety. They are essential to our workforce and our communities. But with this bill, by focusing on fear and division, we risk driving out hardworking people who are contributing to the state's success. If we push families like mine out of Tennessee, we lose the valuable contributions they make to our economy, our schools, our communities. The fiscal impact of this bill also can't be ignored. The estimated cost exceeds $5.5 million to create the Immigrant Enforcement Division and fund enforcement grants. Local governments will face additional recurring costs, further burdening their budgets, and this doesn't even account for the cost of litigation, which could far exceed the current estimates, as we heard last night during Senate testimony. For a state that prides itself on fiscal responsibility, this bill is a costly move in the wrong direction. It expands government in ways that harm families, waste taxpayer dollars, and erode the very values that make Tennessee great. I come here today so that you can see my face as a native Nashvilleian whose family and future are on the line. Alejandro, Marco, and I are just one example of the many families who contribute to this state and want nothing more than continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Warbington. Any members have any questions for Ms. Warbington? Thank you for being here. Mr. Pratt, excuse me for that. Representative Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, yesterday we heard them both, and so I wasn't ready to raise my hand. So, thank you so much for being here. So, if we were to pass this bill, I mean, can you tell me in reality what this is going to do to your family specifically? How is everyone feeling, and are you making plans as a result?
Ms. Worthington?
Yes, I mean, we are already making plans. Alejandro said to me the other day that he's already feeling unsafe, even though this bill hasn't passed. Obviously, we know what's happening at the federal level. He said he doesn't know if he can make it another 4 years living like this, living in fear. He's afraid every time he drives with our son and I'm not in the car. And to be honest, I'm terrified of that as well, but I can't tell him that because his fear is greater than mine. So of course we are making plans. I mean, he's lost his mother and his father in Mexico. He doesn't really have a life to go back home to, but of course that's in the back of his mind, and planning for that. Additionally, my son's school is majority Latino and those families are scared to death.
Representative Johnson?
Thank you, and I completely understand that. Last week, I was in a forum in Knoxville about the special session, and there were a lot of teachers present and teachers that teach ELL, and they're just literally crying to me, Gloria, please, our kids are terrified every day at school. Some aren't coming to school because they are afraid someone's going to come to their school. And so I just through them, I really understand the fear and everything with what is happening. And so I understand that, and I'm so sorry that you all have to go through this. This isn't an immigration bill. This is a mass deportation bill, and it is divisive and full of hate. Thank you.
Representative Lynn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take it from your testimony that Alejandro came here illegally. He did not apply to the federal government to be able to work in the United States or for citizenship in the United States. Is that true?
Ms. Worthington?
He came here over 20 years ago. He was fleeing violence in his country. He has made a life here in the United States, and built a business and now has a family.
Representative Lynn?
So no, he did not apply to the federal government for U.S. citizenship or for any sort of stay because he was in fear for his life. Now, we as elected officials are sworn to uphold the United States Constitution and all of the laws of the United States, the Tennessee Constitution, and all of the laws of Tennessee. Do you feel that he should have, not even knowing you, not even knowing the wonderful future family that he could have, that he should have made the effort and followed the law to apply to be a citizen of the United States, or at least for some sort of sanctuary so that he could have the protection of the law, because that's what the law is for. The law is to protect everyone. So do you feel that he should have, all those years ago or any time in between, you said over 20 years, applied for citizenship? Because it does sound like he would be a valuable citizen, but we have to have everybody following the law. We have to. So can you answer that?
Ms. Worthington?
Yeah. Respectfully, he did try. Over 20 years ago, things were different here. And it is a misunderstanding that is easy to change your status once you are here. It is incredibly difficult, and there are very few avenues and ways to do that. It takes a long time also, and it's also incredibly costly. So it is a misunderstanding that it's easy for someone, like you say, that like Alejandro, that's been a law-abiding member of the community, there are very few avenues. He didn't have any options.
All right, next on the list, we have Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleague from Middle Tennessee asked my question.
Okay, thank you, sir. Seeing no other questions, Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Warbington, and for your courage to share this story in what can be a very hostile time. I just wanted you to kind of talk more about the difficulties that people have trying to go about this the proper way, even though I sit here on a dais with many of those who are descendants of undocumented immigrants from Europe. I want to ask, as people try and come here today, what are some challenges that they face? How many years does it take? What are some barriers that make legal or quote unquote legal entry? Because I want to be clear that these folks are not crossing the border crossed them. These people are indigenous people coming to their land that had been their land. And so let's just be honest, let's tell some truth here today. But let's talk about, if we use the argument of this committee, some of the difficulties in the traditional legal system, because it is a broken system for a lot of people trying to get here legally. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Representative Jones and Ms. Warbington, we are not here to debate the immigration system per se. This bill does not have to do with that. So if you could limit your comments and your questions to what this bill is actually about. Ms. Warbington, you're recognized.
Thank you. Well, I can speak a little bit more to our situation. We've been dealing with this immigration process since 2017. And like I said, when he came here, there were no options for him to change his legal status. He spoke to multiple immigration attorneys, and there are very few avenues. And one of those avenues is if you are married to a U.S. citizen, if you can find an employer to sponsor you. Those are two of the ways that you can change your immigration status here. But many of these families have been here. The majority of immigrants have been here for over 15 years. Can you imagine building a life here, somewhere where you were looking for safety, for a better life, and then being asked to leave? I just can't even imagine that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
So you're recognized, sir, to tell us about the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is really timely. I appreciate it when we were out of session, and I hope everyone on the committee heard our legal advice. We have some good lawyers, and they do a good job. And I think when the question came up about constitutionality, the part that he referenced about it not being constitutional is what I'm trying to correct with this amendment. What this amendment does is to basically hold harmless those of us who give of our valuable time, whether it's local or state, to represent our people in a way that we deem fit, to say, hey, we're not going to arrest you for representing your people and what your people are wishing to do. So this is fairly simple. It simply allows a locally elected or statewide elected persons to vote their conscience and what their people are telling them to do, and not at risk of being jailed. So with that, I ask for approval.
Thank you, sir. Representative Also, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with House Rule 25, I move to lay this amendment on the table.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table this motion. We'll go back to Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's amazing that folks that represent the legal community, both in this House and working for this House, are not violently jumping up and down and agreeing with this amendment. This amendment is trying to get this bill back into a constitutional state. This will not hold up in a court of law, be it conservative or liberal. This is a bad part of a bill. This is damaging to us. It was Plato that said the price that men at the time, he said, have for being not involved in advocating public service is to be ruled by evil men. We need good people in our offices. We need people that we don't always agree with in our offices. I lose a bunch of votes here, and that doesn't bother me because we have a voice and a vote. But to say that my vote can now put me or a local city council or local county commission at risk of being jailed because we voted contrary to this particular bill is a shame. So again, I ask this body to consider not tabling this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We will now be voting on the tabling motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. The motion is tabled. Next, we have Representative Jones, and if you are recognized to give us that drafting code, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is drafting code 2552.
Thank you for that. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
We have a motion and a second. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment similar to one filed, but slightly different. It's seeking to get rid of section 6 provision, which states it is unlawful for an official to violate subsection A. A violation of subsection A is a Class E felony. For the purpose of this subsection, each official who in their capacity as a member of the governing body of a local government votes in the affirmative to adopt a sanctuary policy is in violation of this section. And so it's to remove this provision to charge people with a felony for voting their conscience. And the reason I say this is that my colleague on the right of me here from Knox County stated that we have an oath to uphold the Constitution. And if we go to Article 1, Section 6, there's a speech and debate clause, which comes from the 1689 English Bill of Rights, which was a response to the British Crown's history of using legal measures to intimidate and punish legislators for legislative action. So the English king was punishing lawmakers in Parliament for how they voted. And so our founders had the wisdom to say, let's protect legislators from being charged criminally for their official legislative acts. There is no other law in the state of Tennessee where if we vote, that you can be charged with a Class E felony. Imagine if this was on the other foot. Imagine if we were in the majority and I would charge my members of this committee with felonies every time there's a mass shooting for voting for crazy gun laws. Imagine we charge you with a felony for that. Imagine if we charge you for a felony for voting for laws that are killing people because they don't have access to healthcare. Imagine if we charge you for a felony for that. And so this is a very dangerous slope. And one day the shoe will flip in this state. And when you're in the minority, you want to ask yourself if this is the precedent you want to start. The Senate Judiciary Chairman had the wisdom to offer this very same amendment, who was a Republican, because he saw that this was unconstitutional. He listened to the attorneys. And so if you take your oath seriously, I would say let us not adopt this immediate lawsuit that will come from this legislation. Secondly, there are no sanctuary cities in Tennessee. But it is so interesting to me that this statute here is particularly going after sanctuary policies, because the word sanctuary comes from the Latin word sanctuarium, which means holy. And so we have people here who, if this was in effect, would be criminalizing houses of worship from being places of refuge from persecution. So what this reminds me of is to be quite honest, the fugitive slave codes, where people were charged on the Underground Railroad for doing what was moral, for doing what was just. And now this is the only time we're gonna have in Tennessee law that says if you vote in the affirmative, you will be charged with a felony. Well, I wish that I was in a local government, because I would file a bill immediately, because you have no constitutional right to go after local officials for doing their job, which their constituents sent them up there to do, which is vote as their district represents. And my district is very different than many of your districts. My district is one of the most diverse districts. I was just at a high school in my district where there's over 62 languages spoken, with kids who some of their parents are undocumented. That's not scary. That's not something to be terrified of. And so let's take our constitutional oath seriously. To the representative who is going to speak from Williamson County, as an attorney, let's take our constitutional oath seriously and not create a slippery slope of prosecuting people based off of how they vote when it's voting the conscience of their district. Because the only time we've seen in history that elected officials have been targeted for how they vote are in authoritarian regimes. This is un-American. This bill is immoral, It's constitutionally inconsistent. It's economically indefensible because there's going to be litigation and automatic lawsuits filed because of this legislation. And so this is, again, to remove the provision charging people with a crime for voting their conscience. And I hope that you will consider it, particularly those who are so keen to bring up the Constitution when it's convenient, but so prone to ignore it when our very own attorney, who's nonpartisan, non-political, who serves all of us, told us, friends, listen, this bill is unconstitutional if this stays in it. Let's heed the advice of legal counsel and do our legislative duty and our oath to citizens of Tennessee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll be voting on the tabling motion. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? No. Ayes have it. Motion is tabled.